All right, we are on number 6 of the 9 proven strategies to scale your racket stringing business. So we are back for another video. We are moving along this series. And so we've covered upgrading your equipment, building partnerships, offering diverse services, marketing, and online presence, and then expanding the customer base. And so today, Brad and I are just going to jump in. This graphic messed up, so sorry. It's a little messed up, but it's basically in your stringing business, hiring and training staff. And of course, that is going to be relevant when we start talking about scaling your business, whether you're moving locations, adding locations, maybe adding a stringer, maybe going to brick and mortar, whatever it might be. So some of these things hopefully will resonate with you. Others might just be ideas or just something to think about. But hopefully we've got something for everyone here. And so we are glad, Brad, I'm glad you're back for another episode. So we can get right into it. And again, if this information is helpful, useful, please, drop us a note and like and subscribe as always. Okay, so first off, defining your business goals and growth. So this is, a lot of these things are basic business foundational things to consider when you're scaling any kind of business, but some are going to obviously be we're gearing it specifically to racket stringing business. And so goal setting, you got to have some kind of goal like, are you increasing the number of rackets that you're stringing every week? Have you looked at your numbers and you go, well, I just can't do any more myself. So how am I going to scale this so that I can meet the demand in my market? And so there might be certain times, peak times, certain volume. You have maybe some need for having a second person. You might be thinking about stringing, being a tournament stringer in your local area, whether it's a college or a park or whatever, and you need another person. So you got to kind of start to define that goal. Brad?
Yeah, no, you're right. I ran into a problem this week. It was the first time in 3 years of stringing that I wasn't able to string 3 rackets for someone. I had to run out of town last minute. I had to actually zip down to New York City and pick my dad up. He was down there for the state high school tennis tournament, got sick, ended up in the hospital. So I zipped down, drove down, and they discharged him, thank God, and we got home. But I had someone who called and wanted 3 rackets strung. And this would have been a great time to have another person that I could rely on who, was kind of maybe not directly working for me, but someone that I collaborated with. And, if they run into issues, they could use me. If I run into issues, I could use them. But I didn't have that. And that would have, I felt bad that I couldn't help this person. They've been a good client, but they ended up just going to a local shop in town.
Right. That is a really good point, because when you are alone, when you're in business for yourself and you're a racket stringer and it's just you, your business is you, right? And so if something happens to you, or you need to take a break, or let's say you hurt your back, or you can't string, or you have to go out of town for an emergency, your business basically stops. So how are you going to keep it going? And so for you, it would have been something like you're mentioning, maybe have a backup where, hey, you know what, I'm going to be out of town. It could be another stringer who's already established, but you have built some kind of rapport, and you go, hey, you know what, let's split it, 30-70, or you just give me $5 per racket or something, or even, work something else out so that you don't lose that, because in your case, they went to another shop. And what if they like the person that's in there and they get some other benefit that works for them, and then they might not come back to you? Not saying that would happen, but it could. If it's not somebody who has built that connection with you personally. So Yeah, I think those are some great points, and that's kind of what you have to think about. Or maybe certain parts of the year, like if you have a tournament coming up, then you need to figure out how to do that. And it's really hard to do that at the last minute, right? You
Yeah,
have to have
sure.
this kind of thing set up way, obviously ahead of time. So that takes us to the next point. There's a couple different parts to this point. So we have 2A here, and then it goes on. So creating job roles and descriptions. Okay, so the first one would be for stringing tech, let's say. So that would be obviously somebody to take on some of the extra actual stringing work with you, right? So what is their responsibility going to be? Are you going to let them just string rackets? Are you going to let them do grip replacements, having them inspect the frame, quality control? So this is kind of like where you obviously want them to be able to do exactly like you're doing. Because I know when I initially started a stringing business a long time ago, and it was a brick and mortar shop, and it was a friend of mine and I from college, and we just opened the shop together. And he had a whole different philosophy in handling customers, different philosophy in stringing, when to give something free, when not to give something free. And then I kind of had my own method. Not saying either one's really better or necessarily the right way. We just had different ways of doing it. And it got to the point where people are like, hey, is Joel there or is Pat there? And they were looking for the other person because they kind of had built up some type of
Yes.
like little, like, oh, well, he gives me this, or, he doesn't charge me for this, or he gives me $2. And it just doesn't work when you're one business. You need to be consistent, and you need to know what the other person is doing so that it doesn't really matter which one of you is there. Otherwise, you're basically back to the same problem of you're just using the same location kind of thing.
Yeah.
And making it clear what skills are required. Like if they don't quite have the proficiency, they're just getting started. Okay, well then you might want to use them maybe for some of the other things and take away some of the responsibilities from you while you're training them up to be stringing better, more proficient in stringing, and then just have them take on some of those other responsibilities, and then you're doing more of the other thing, and then possibly getting them up to speed, teaching them the way that you start the racket, the way I think we'll get into that a little bit later, but I don't need to go too much into that. But it's kind of like you really need to make sure you have an idea of what the skills are that you want them to have. The second part of that is like you would be maybe the senior stringing tech, the lead, or having somebody else. Like if you already have somebody else working with you and you're expanding beyond that, having a person that's the lead, and then they're supervising the other people and, teaching them while they go, kind of like an apprentice kind of program. And again, the same kinds of things: advanced stringing skills, experience with the high-end customer requests, and do they have leadership? And that's, if you're maybe moving to multiple locations where people are going to need some autonomy, they're going to be working autonomously, they're going to be working on their own. You need to have the same type of systems in place.
I think you froze. Oh, there you are.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Hopefully we didn't miss too much of that, but okay. So that takes us on to the next part. And this would be customer service rep. You might just have somebody that, let's say you are managing your stringing business, but all the other things are maybe too much. Maybe you can bring somebody on board that can just assist with customer service and the orders, providing the information, teach them on tennis and strings and all that. They can maybe help with delivering and taking in the rackets, getting them ready. Inventory, purchasing, organizing everything, email support, all that kind of stuff. So it's like almost like an assistant. I don't know if you could get away with having a complete virtual assistant in this kind of case, because it is a kind of a service business that requires you to be on premise. But some of these things could possibly be done remotely. What do you think?
It's some of the stuff, certainly, organizing, a database of your clients, and, just all the checklists that comes with that, the time, the date it was strong, just making a good, was it paid? How was it paid? Cash, check, Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, whatever, just keeping a good log of everything. You certainly can do some of that remote. That's for sure.
Yeah. So the third thing is your hiring strategy. So again, recruiting, where, posting the job opening somewhere, maybe somewhere where you're going to find people who are sports and racket focused, at clubs, maybe just word of mouth, networking with clubs. And then the interview process, how you're going to like maybe have a set of questions that you want to ask. So that way you keep that consistent. And that way it kind of, keeps it the same every time you're interviewing, and you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel on that.
Yeah, right.
And figuring out what it is you're really looking for. By now you've kind of laid all that out, so you know kind of what type of person you're looking for and what kind of string proficiency they need to have. And of course you need somebody who's going to be consistent, not going to steal from you. It's going to do a good job, show up on time, stuff like that. That's pretty obvious stuff.
And it'd be probably a good idea to have 2 stringing machines too, just so,
Yep.
especially if they need to practice on one while you're stringing, or, that way you can string rackets together. If you're training them and stuff, they could be side by side and kind of watch you. And
exactly. And we kind of talked about that, I think, in another video about,
Mhm.
having more than one machine. And here you go. And this is a good reason why possibly to have that. And then how are you going to develop that training program? So, of course, your own company, you need to share the values of that, basic customer service, and then, of course, customer service that's specific to tennis, right? How you deal with, tennis clients, and then getting proficient in all the different areas as far as knots, stringing tension, grip replacement, how to handle, the equipment, the strings, so that you don't damage them. All that's kind of part of your training program, right? And you can create a pretty simple checklist and then make sure that you've covered all that so that you have a consistent teaching method for, onboarding and so forth. And developing training programs, and depending on if you're later on when you're looking at multiple people, you're going to create a system so that it kind of runs itself, and basically covering the whole thing. But where are you going to get all this information if you don't want to create it yourself? Well, you can use something that comes from like the USRSA or some other organization that trains people. You can even have them, break down what it is that the USRSA trains on, use that information, train your own, then have them get certified through that. And then maybe possibly they will get a bonus or something if they pass those tests, because they have different levels of USRSA certification. You don't have to necessarily go straight to the MRT kind of thing. You can just, there's one for people who work in your shop even, so they're just trained on knowledge, and then there's one for just basic stringing, and then there's the MRT, I think, is how
which
it goes.
is right.
Yeah.
A little deeper understanding of all things racket and string.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're outside the US, you have more options with the ERSA and a few other organizations as well, that you can get trained on. But the whole idea is getting everybody up to speed, being proficient, knowing what you're doing, and so forth.
And I think we'll do a video on that in the future, all the different certification options out there, because there are several now.
Yep, that would be good, because we've gone through some of them ourselves and kind of know sort of what's out there and stuff. And this one just talks a little bit about implementing a mentorship program. That's maybe for later down the road for most people, but you're just basically having somebody mirror somebody who's really good at what they're doing. And you want to have mentors, whether it's you're the mentor or somebody else in your shop that's the main stringer. Have them be the mentor and have other people kind of watch them and how they handle business and how they string and all that. And then number 6 for part of this whole hiring thing is standardizing a stringing and quality control process. So that way you are able to kind of have some checks and balances in place, right? You're going to have a checklist that everybody's going to have to follow. That way you have a consistent string tension, the correct pattern, flawless finishing. There's no sloppy work anywhere. And that way, if there is, you can find out where that is and where you need to kind of, provide some support and so forth.
Yes. Being a home
And
stringer in many ways is harder than being a tournament stringer, I think, because
yep,
tournament stringers are dealing with the best equipment, the newest equipment, no worn grommets, no worn bumper guards, no rackets from the 1970s or 80s, or, so there's a lot to being a home stringer that, you got to be prepared for.
Yep, there's a lot of more variables, and sometimes those variables only pop up every once in a while, and you got to be prepared for them. Good point. And that's why you have that. Every company, once you start growing, you have those standard operating procedures, right? You have, whether it's a manual, whether it's on a piece of paper, just kind of like, this is our way of doing business. This is how we do it, and so that way anybody picking it up can kind of see exactly how you're doing stuff. And that's all, that's something that you can also post for people too. That way they know what to expect. And then you have to have some type of quality control process in place, whether at the end of stringing a racket, you double check it, or have somebody else check it if this is a new employee, right? Look to make sure the pattern's right, that they didn't skip skip a loop somewhere,
Right.
that the knots are tied, no misstringing, misweaving anywhere, that the strings aren't kinked, that they didn't cross over in places, that the racket's not cracked, all those kind of things. And if they replace the grip, make sure the tape looks nice on it, that it's straight, there's not any, weird grip installation happening or anything like that. So that way you can correct any of that stuff as it's going on, and that way it's only going to happen once or twice. And then, of course, performance evaluation feedback, based on whatever your key performance indicators are, tracking all your metrics. That way you can kind of give good feedback, keep your workers, your stringers that you bring in on board, keeping them in the loop of how they're doing, having incentives to keep them working effectively, and keeping them happy, keeping your business going, all that kind of stuff. So those are all parts of it. And we just got, I think, a couple more points. Upskilling and continuing education. I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, but there are advanced workshops out there to kind of hone in on the skills. The USRSA also has the certifications that we just talked about. The ERSA, I know we're going to do a video on this some other time in the future. Attend industry events, whether it's, even they could be buying shows, or just places where companies get together, talk about the industry. Tennis industry has that. PTR has, I think the Professional Tennis Registry has that. There's different places where you can get this kind of follow through stuff. So
even social media, Facebook has some good stringing groups where you get some great stringers from.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. We're both part of a few of those online where you can get like, hey, look at this racket. Have you guys ever seen this problem, or do you guys know what this is? And then somebody will chime in and go, oh yeah, Or if you're looking for a certain kind of stringing machine or advice, or you're looking for parts, or those kind of online groups are great for that. And I think this is our last point. No, there's a couple more. Okay, for 9, customer feedback loop. Find out from your customers, are they happy with the work when you bring, after you brought somebody on board, make sure that they're happy with it. Find out how they're doing, all that kind of stuff. So that way you can kind of keep building your business up.
And that's a tricky slope too. You're once in a blue moon, you're going to find someone who's never happy with anything, no matter what. So you do have to be careful. You want to make sure they're satisfied with everything. But I haven't run into that myself. I have one client who's a bit much, but I haven't I did have one client I asked never to come back to me again. Out of, maybe 200 clients, it wasn't worth it. But I even know, like, my brother who owns a restaurant, he had a customer who would complain almost every time they came in. And finally, my brother said, "Hey, please stop coming here. We obviously can't do a good enough job for you. We get it wrong all the time. Please stop coming in." And it's
Yep.
true. Sometimes you just
Mhm.
have to do that. Take the loss and just be like, "We're not for you."
Yeah.
But it is important to follow up. And I know customers, wow, thanks for calling. I really appreciate that. And, if you string a racket for someone and text them a week later, "Hey, I hope you've had a chance to hit with the new string job, and hope you've been hitting them well," or something.
Yeah, because you do have to back up your stringers too,
Yeah.
as far as like if people are talking, bad about, the new person that you just hired or whatever, you got to take that for a grain of salt, but you also have to like say, hey, we're all trying to better our business here. We're
Yep.
hiring this, and you have to back up. You have to stand behind that person, your stringer, and and in the face of your client to make sure that they understand that yes, you are trying to improve your service, but you are going to stand behind your work, and we are going to do our best. We're going to continue to do our best, and if you possibly had a bad stringing job, it's not like you don't want to have the conversation like, oh yeah, we hired him. I don't know. He's not really doing that great. I don't know if we're going to keep him around. You don't want to have that kind of attitude,
Yeah, it's one thing if they missed a weave, or
Yeah. It's
clearly
like, yeah,
they
you know
put it
what?
on their
Thanks for
home.
bringing that up. We're working on getting him completely up to speed. Next time he'll be ready, because you don't want to have it where like, oh, well, next time I come in, I got to make sure you're here. You don't
Yeah,
want to have that
right.
right. So yeah, that's a good point. You've got to really build up um, your staff, but also do it so that your clients continue keeping coming back to you and stuff, so
Yeah.
and giving you positive feedback and stuff. So that brings us to the last point: scaling operations and adjusting staff. I mean, we kind of been talking about most of that kind of stuff, but it's just kind of summarizing a lot of this stuff. Like, you got to forecast kind of your peak seasons when you have higher demand, adjusting your staffing. So if you have things coming up and it's just you, now might be a good time to think about, well, I think I probably need to add somebody on, or have somebody else be able to help while I need to step away for a short while or whatever. So you don't lose your business and you keep it growing, and you don't have to keep starting over every time you leave. Because that's like the worst thing, when somebody comes into town maybe once every so often and they count on you, and then you're just not available a few times. And it's like, oh, okay, well, they're going to stop trying to call you.
Yeah. Right.
Expanding, and then of course think about expanding. Are you expanding to new locations? Maybe moving also into a club, brick and mortar, and then like you were saying earlier, Brad, when we first started, outsourcing during peak periods. So peak periods, or that might, in your case, it might be overflow, or it might be having to step away to take a holiday, because a lot of people who are in business for themselves, and they basically are the business, hardly ever take a break, right? Or a
Yeah.
vacation,
Yeah.
because just, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose the business. I don't want to lose, um, the money from being gone for a week or two. And then they end up kind of burning out eventually, or just kind of start getting a little bit more bitter towards the business. So
Yeah.
you don't want to do that. So you want to be able to, you know, keep have a healthy growth going in your company, adding support when you need it, so that you can grow your business, and better yet, sustaining it as well during maybe tougher times and stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, so I think today we covered pretty much, let me just rewind here. I think we covered um, the stringing business hiring and training, which basically, I guess, would be onboarding and scaling your business, for the future. And so if you have any questions or comments, this graphic turned out really bad. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It was fine when I made it, but then when I brought it into this when I brought it into Stream Deck, it just StreamYard, it kind of got messed up a little bit. So I'll just leave it on this.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we have three more strategies that go along with scaling your business. So hopefully this has been helpful so far, giving you some ideas. Again, you might have some questions. Feel free to just leave a comment. We'll get back to you on that. Subscribe, like, share this.
Yep.
And if you have something else that you'd like us to make a video on, let us know that as well. So that's kind of my final thought. Brad, thanks for hanging out again today. Anything you want to say before we sign off?
I don't think so, but thanks, Pat. I'm enjoying getting through this. These different parts that we put together, that you put together. So I'm learning. It's reminding me of things that are important, and so I appreciate being part of it.
Thanks, and we'll see everybody soon.